Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy. This is Rosie Hardy Gardening. If you enjoy our videos, please do subscribe to the channel. And it's Q&A time again. So let's get cracking because I seem to have got a lot of questions. Thank you so much everybody for sending these in. Hello Rosie, what are the best trailing summer plants for hanging baskets and containers? Well, you don't actually say whether you're looking for annual trailing hanging basket plants or whether you're wanting perennial ones. So I'm going to give you a few different ones which I like. They may not be the traditional ones that most people would think about, but there are some beautiful trailing tiarellas out there. There are lots of new varieties. They are great because they give you a long amount of foliage, and in the same way you can use things like ivy, which yes, you haven't got flower on those, but you can get very good foliage, and they are brilliant, and they will give you that background for everything else to grow around. There are some very, very good new tuberous begonias out there which flower and flower and flower, and in such a wide range of colours as well. So those are always good to look out for. So try something like that. Think out of the box. Don't just go for the general normal capybara or any of those sorts of things. That was an animal, not what I meant to say. Don't go for the normal sort of Tinkerbell type trailing stuff that's out there, because that needs a lot of food, a lot of deadheading. Whereas some of the herbaceous stuff, perennial stuff, is actually quite easy. It doesn't need as much looking after. Enjoy your baskets. I have moss growing on the crowns of some ferns and on the soil around some herbaceous plants. If I cover it up with soil to block the sunlight, do you think it will kill it? Thank you. Right, this is a contentious one because we need moss, and moss is good, and if you have moss growing it means that actually things are quite healthy. If you go and cover up the moss, especially if it's on the crowns of ferns or on the crowns of herbaceous, you're not doing those plants any good either. So is it because you don't like the look of it, or is it because you think, oh, it shouldn't be there? If you think about where ferns and a lot of woodland plants grow out in their natural habitat, they will naturally have moss around them, and the moss is helping them to keep some moisture there. It's a bit of a symbiotic relationship between them. The moss is not going to do the ferns any harm. If it's right over the top, then just pull it off gently and let it go around underneath, because it's actually acting as a growing mulch. So be a little bit more kind to the mosses, because they're very ancient plants. They are very good, and that, you know, if we've got a good amount of mosses, we've got a good healthy ecosystem. So we need to start thinking about that more than actually going, oh, it's untidy, I don't like it, it shouldn't be growing there. Think about what it is doing and how it is helping the plant that you've got. If you don't like it, then consider taking all the moss off one plant, leaving it on another, and see which of those plants actually is healthier. And it should be the one that's got the moss around the base, because it should be getting more moisture to it. So that is something to do. And that is really all I can say. I would not cover it up with soil unless it's out in a bare area. Because basically if it's with the plants, then it's not doing a lot of harm. What are some small to medium-sized shrubs for a garden with honey fungus? I've been told Chinomile speciosa would be a good choice, as this is resistant. We have slowly lost a couple of shrubs over the past few years to the fungus. Thanks in advance. So there are a few shrubs which are definitely resistant to the fungus, and these are the things that you should be trying to go. So one which is a very pretty, and it's an evergreen, is the common myrtle. Now that is fine, it's got a lovely stem colour as well. You can prune it, cloud prune it, so that is something to look at. I would really consider that one. In the same vein, cotinus, so the smoke bush, that is also resistant, and you can get different coloured foliage on those. So you can get yellow leafed ones, you get slightly grey green leafed ones, you can get beautiful purple leafed ones. So there's a good range in those, and they are, you know, they're medium-sized shrubs, but they're all prunable. So this is quite good with some of these ones, is that they are prunable, and therefore you can keep them to the size that you want, you can keep them to the shape that you would like. And yes, absolutely, Chinomele speciosa is also something that is resistant. You get the beautiful flower in the spring, you can train them up against walls, you can keep them as a freestanding shrub, and then you get beautiful fruit that is usable for jellies. So what's not to like with putting those in? The other thing that came to mind when I first looked at this was, of course, shrubby salvias. That's another thing. Hello Rosy, I find it difficult to grow Allium Purple Sensation from seed. I've grown, collected it, germinates, then I lose it. And I've realised that I've got tiny little bulbs there when I am looking at what I've got in the soil. It's going to take me a long time. Right now, this is where you have to realise that growing something that requires it to get to a bulb of a certain age is going to take a long time. So from seed, alliums to a bulb that is going to actually flower can take between 5 to 7 years. Do you actually have that time? Are you prepared to wait and see what you get? Absolutely fine, but you won't get your beautiful show right the way through. If you already have some allium bulbs that are in the ground and you know where they are, lift them and see if they've got little bulbils on the side at the base. That is much quicker, because from the smaller bulbs just splitting off the side, those will become a mature flowering plant probably within 2 years. So it's a much quicker way of getting yourself some more plants or some more alliums to go around in the area. If not, try some of the perennial forms. They're not as tall, they're later flowering, but they are brilliant plants. Now, if you enjoy propagating, why not take a look at our propagation course? There is a QR code here for you to be able to scan, or there is a link below. It takes you through all sorts of different propagation, and everybody enjoys trying to propagate their own plants. And what's wrong with getting a few plants of your own free? Hi Rosy, thank you so much for answering my previous question. I've now got a question about Cryptomeria. Now, Cryptomeria, beautiful shrub, and to put in a few years ago, it's compact form, can't remember the name, wants to know if they can prune it, nothing drastic. Well, what I can say is that my mother used to have a Cryptomeria and it was wonderful, but every now and again it would put out a limb that was in the wrong direction, or it was just a little bit too tall, because she liked to be able to see over the top of it from one of the windows in the downstairs rooms, and so it had to come down, and we never found any pruning at any time caused a problem to the Cryptomeria. It grows back quite nicely. So as long as you don't prune halfway down a stem and leave a horrible stump, then you're fine. Some of the smaller bits go in, just take them out and do it as a thinning method. That will grow back perfectly well. We've also found that if you trim over the top, you lose that beautiful flow that it has, but it will soon grow back and sprout back. So absolutely go ahead and prune. It is better, however, just say this, that the pruning should be done in the spring, because that is when it's more actively growing. So if you can do it in the spring, that will work far better for you. Is it true that Scabiosa perennials prefer a mix with sand? If so, what sand can I mix in bed? Best regards from Scandinavia Zone 4. Okay, so scabious are best in an alkaline soil. Alkaline soils tend to be on the surface quite dry but hold a little bit of moisture lower down. So that is one thing. Also means that they're not that nutrient rich, because the Scabiosa, native to chalk downland, used to quite poor soil. So that's another thing to be aware of. Now, if you are going to mix in a little bit of sand and grit, then, you know, just get something which is not too fine, something between 1 and 2 mil is about the grade, maybe 0.5 to 2 mil grade that you can mix in. Horticultural grit, horticultural sand is perfectly good, and that is what I do. But just put a little bit in when you are planting, or if you're doing them in containers, just add a little bit to your containers, and that will help perfectly well. You can alternatively use the 1 to 2 millimeter cork if you're doing it in a container, and that will give you a really good free draining compost, so that you've got a good mix there and you're not going to get the roots too wet. Have fun with them. Hi Rosie, I bought 2 frilly knickers a month ago since I saw they were introduced by you. Much looking forward to my blooms. My question is about Sertomium falcatum, which is a fern. Has created a stem and trunk over the years from where the fronds have emerged and died. Do I leave the fern as is, or should I bury it deeper? The fern is doing what it wants to do naturally, and that is, as it produces fronds, those die back, it produces a slight stem. That is the nature of the plant. It is always a very bad idea to suddenly think, oh gosh, I've got to put these things deeper so that I get the fern. What you need to do instead is think about, how do I slightly cover up the fact that that fern has gone a little bit further up if you don't like the look of it. It is all part of the fern, it's what its nature is, and therefore it should be, you know, admired for how it grows. But if you don't like that bit of bare stem that you've got, then think about another lower growing fern to put in front to hide that. And that, I think, is your best option with that. That's what I think is best. Okay, here we go. Hi Rosie, what is your favourite perennial to grow in large containers? Well, instantly I would go for salvias. There are so many salvias, they flower for so long. I don't think I could give you a full breakdown of the names of the different ones, because it depends on your colour scheme, whether you want reds, blues, pinks, whites, whatever you are looking for. So they are my go-to for giving you a really good effect in a container, would be salvias. You don't say whether this is for sun or shade either. The salvias are going to prefer a slightly sunnier, so maybe full sun all day or part sun. If you're thinking about a container for shade, then I would consider putting in some ferns. G'day Rosie, thank you for taking our questions. I live in Texas, United States, Zone 8B. Okay, so very similar to we are. Last year I purchased a young peach tree. It was left out in a container covered with frost cloth. However, the main stem seems to be looking dead at the buds. They're brown, not opened. A sucker is growing. Is my tree salvageable? Right, I would suggest that the sucker that you've got comes from a rootstock, therefore will not be what your peach is. So you will need to remove that. What you need to do is you need to go with your thumbnail or your fingernail, and you need to go to the stem of the tree, look at where there are buds that are dead, and just scrape up a little bit of the bark. If it is brown underneath, that bit is dead. Keep on going down the stem until you get to a bit where you see it is green. Cut out everything that is brown to buds where it is green, and it should then come back. Peaches are something that are quite temperamental and occasionally will do this dieback, especially if they're not established. Yours is a young tree, therefore it won't have a huge amount of root growth at the base. But I would definitely consider getting rid of the sucker, going down and seeing where you have got green, and then cutting back the dead wood to those points, and you will be amazed at how much will come back. Then you need to make sure that you give it a good feed. Find something which is a general food that you can give it, either granular or liquid, and look after it in this next season, because you need to get it growing, and then you need to carefully start pruning it back into the shape that you require. Hello, you inspired me to try Verbena Bampton. I started from seeds, currently 1/4 inch tall with 4 leaves. When can I transition to outside? Any pointers? My climate is hot, dry summers and rainy, cool winters. Thank you. Sounds as though they are just about ready. If you've got 4 leaves already, you're ready to move them on. I would move them first of all into a small container. You don't say whether they're in a seed tray or whether you've put them into plugs. Doesn't really make much difference, but I would get them out of what the seed compost they are in, get them into a multi-purpose compost with some food in it so that they get going. Once you've got a good crown and the roots are to the bottom of that smaller pot, straight out in the garden, dig a hole, put water in the hole first, put the plants in, or if you're growing them in a big container outside, exactly the same, put them in, water in first, then put them in water, and make sure they're watered for at least the first 2 months, probably once a week, just to get them going. And then they should be brilliant for you, and then they should start self-seeding around. Remember, if you don't want them self-seed too much, after their first flower, give them a cut to halfway, then they'll come back up again. They are a brilliant plant. I'm so glad you're trying them. Hi Rosie, greetings from Vancouver Island, Zone 8. I want to plant a large flowering shrub or small tree, 10 to 12 feet eventually, in an area that gets morning sun only and the soil is constantly wet. Flowers are imperative. It's outside the window of a hospice unit. Thank you kindly for your time. Okay, so this is quite a tricky area. It's the wet ground all the time that is causing me issues on what I think you could grow. The morning sun and the fact that it's there, that's fine. A little bit of flower. Now, you're not going to get flower all the time, unfortunately, but something that will flower for a good length of time would be one of the many hydrangeas. Not the mop head types. I'm more thinking of the involucrata types, so the lovely bigger headed ones which will get much taller. So that would be one thing. So a hydrangea. Physocarpus, or that one will do quite well in a wetter soil and come through, and again you can have good coloured foliage on that, so different colours. You can get the limey green or the yellow green ones, which are great, and then you have the lovely flower again on that, and they'll get quite tall, so that is something to consider. I wouldn't consider the purple leaf Physocarpus, because if you're saying it's a slightly darker area, it won't show up very well. So go for the paler ones, which then gives interest as well as the flower. Then cornus is always good, so you can get some of the tree cornus, which will give you fantastic flowers through the spring. You'll get beautiful fruits on there later in the year, and it goes the amazing colours. And also, even with those tree ones, the branches look good, so have a think about those ones. Hi Rosie, I'm looking for advice on fertilisers. My borders are a mix of perennials, annuals and a number of dahlias. Which fertiliser should I use to encourage flowering, and when should I apply them? Okay, so you've got such a mixture there that you really need a broad spectrum fertiliser, and when you look at fertiliser, there is always an NPK rating. Now, if you're wanting flowering, get the N to be as low as possible and the K to be as high as possible. You will find specific ones out there for general flowering plants, and that's what you want. Steer away from anything that is for vegetables because they're wanting more nitrogen, because it's leafy vegetables and you want more nitrogen for that. So always look at the NPK ratio at the bottom of the packet, and the lower in N and higher in K, the better. The P is for the rooting, so that is fine. So that is the main thing. I always think that Maxi Crop, the seaweed fertilizer that you water on, is brilliant, but that is for extra. So that is when you say are growing in containers and you're watering and you're needing to feed that way. Otherwise, if it's out on the ground, you want to be getting something that is granular that you can put on. Spring is a good time to be putting it on. Always put it on when the soil is moist, and then always make sure that you have put it on, and maybe a day late. If it doesn't rain, then a day later just give a little bit of water around the plants. Try not to scatter it on the plants, scatter it on the ground around so that it dissolves into the soil. Hi Rosie, I love hellebores, especially the Rodney Davy hybrids. I've grown lots for me. Never really sure what to do with them regarding the leaves. Do I cut it back in the spring? Do I cut them out in autumn? Done both and I don't seem to do any harm. Well, that's fine. If what you're doing is working, that is fine. But with the Rodney Davy types, those new beautiful leaves are what you actually want as well, because they've got that wonderful marbling on them. Now, it doesn't matter if you take off the odd few bigger leaf that stopped being marbled, which is shadowing other plants around it. That is absolutely fine. They produce enough and they are really good. The main rules are, in the coming up to the winter, so in December, before we get to Christmas, you should go out to all your hellebores and get rid of all old leaf, because it's looking tatty, it's not very good. And then when you come to January, February, up they come with their beautiful flowers. Their new leaves hold the flowers all together and you get a combination of new leaf, beautiful flower. Brilliant. Then when they finish flowering, get rid of dead head them, get rid of all of that. At the same time, if there are any leaves that have got tatty through that time, get rid of those. You will then have lovely foliage. And then during the summer, if they are just a little bit too floppy over the top of other plants, you will not have a problem at taking them off. You're not going to kill the plants. Probably not the time of year, but I miss structure in my border in the winter time. I've got roses, miscanthus, little cherry trees and verbena, all quite decent. What else is there that you can do? I would always suggest that if you're wanting a bit of structure and colour, then always use things which have got good colour stems. There are some beautiful little tiny willows which have lovely stem colour that you can put in, or you can put in cornus. So shrubs which give you lovely stem colour are great. And then anything which has got seed heads works well. So you can leave your rudbeckias, you can leave your Symphyotrichum seed heads there until they collapse, because all of those will create structure and look good, and just leave the tidying up until the spring. Hi Rosie, I live in Kent. I have a very chalky, free draining soil, similar to us here then. Some bulbs like daffodil and tulips do well. I mean, I struggle with alliums and gladioli. Should I give it a try, or is there anything else I can do? I don't understand why they wouldn't do so well for you, because I mean they work quite well for us here. However, what I would suggest is that the normal garden gladioli, the big ones which are normally cut for cut flower, probably not the best in free draining. They like a good soil, and most people tend to grow them very, very well in their vegetable patches, because they're getting the good amount of moisture, they're getting the good amount of nutrients. So I would suggest, if you like gladioli, try a different species. Try something like gladioli ruby, which is a papilio type, and it is a herbaceous type. It's not really growing from a big bulb, it's growing from small bulbs, and it makes a nice clump. So that is a suggestion for that, and it's quite happy in drier soils. And then if you're struggling with the bulb type alliums, why not try the herbaceous alliums? They are great. They make clumps, you can lift them and divide them. They flower usually July, August time, so they're later than the other ones, they're not as tall. So something like Millennium or Lavender Bubbles, give those a try and see what you have. Otherwise, yes, just stick with your daffs and everything else, and maybe have pots of the others so that you have them somewhere else. Hello Rosy, I'm looking for alternatives to bedding plants for containers. This is a little bit similar to that other person's question, but what would you suggest for long flowering options? So I've already suggested tuberous begonias, because they flower and flower and flower. You can take them out, put them in a container, or if you've got them in a smaller container, you can just put that inside frost free, and then they come back next year, so you're not going to lose them. So that's one. Evergreen ivies are brilliant in containers. You get all the different leaf shapes, all the different leaf colours, great for trailing over the top. They are a starting point because they can stay in all year round, and then you can add other things in there. Some of the perennial verbenas, not necessarily Bonariensis or Bampton, I'm talking about Seabrook's Lavender and Margaret's Memory, these ones which make lovely mounds, they rebloom, they are hardy verbenas, so you can use those. Those are really great, and they'll also trail slightly if you want that. There are plenty of hardy geraniums that are reblooming that you can use, and they work really well, or even quite a lot of the reblooming violas. So that gives you quite a few different tips for putting in there. And then if you want something slightly more structural, think about some grasses, because they look good, giving you that extra height and fluffiness in amongst. So Stipa tenuissima or Stipa itchu. I can't pronounce that correctly, but anyway, you can look that one up. Hi Rosie, I'm looking for a suitable plant for a container. This is by the entrance of my garden in front of a fence, which measures 6 foot by 2 foot. I attach some support to the fence if I need it. I want something that gets height and has most of its leaf through the winter. Okay, and it's east facing, so it has morning sun. Right, the first thing that came to mind is look at osmanthus. There are plenty of osmanthus out there. They can be trained, so even if some of them are ones that come down forward, you can grow them up, you can make them into cloud trees, you can make them really interesting. They have beautiful scented foliage. They are basically evergreen, and that would be my go-to for that sort of situation. So look at different types of osmanthus. Hi Rosie, my skimmier plants have lost all the colour in their leaves. They are as pale as the flowers. New green shoots are appearing. Could it be the compost? They're both in pots, thank you. It depends on how long you've had them in the pots. They could have run out of food, but it certainly sounds like a feed or a nutritional problem here with them. Also double check whether or not they are a little bit wet, because that can sometimes make the leaf go a different colour as well. So if the pots are not too big, you could lift and see if they're wet. If they're too heavy, stick your finger down the side and see. But I would very definitely, if they're starting with their new spring growth, give them some food, give them a boost of life, and that will certainly help them. Because the other thing that will be happening is that those are the old leaves, and those leaves will be starting to fall off anyway as the new leaves come through. So, but I definitely think you'd have a feeding issue there. Give them something, a general fertilizer, something like a liquid feed. Maxi Crop is the basic one to go to, and see how you go from there. Hi Rosie, I recently visited the nursery, got some lovely plants, thank you very much. My question is regarding dealing with leather jackets. I'm in a new build garden and I found this year lots nibbling in my new planted things. Should I use nematodes? I've built a wildlife pond to encourage the birds, but I'm not sure I've got enough for a while. Do I use nematodes? Right. So there are some specific nematodes for using for leather jackets. However, they should be used in the spring. What did I say? No, they're not. They are not to be used in the spring. They are for use in October, sort of August to October, so that late summer autumn period is when you should be using those. I'm a little bit loath for you to just drench completely with nematodes, but if you want to do a one-off, then absolutely fine, because even though they say these are for leather jackets, they may not be completely specific, and they may get other beneficial insects as well, so you've got to be very, very careful when you're doing that. Remove debris, get rid of any old debris that is around. They eat anything that is old debris as well. That's why they're going there. There's debris, that's where the eggs are laid. If the grass during the time when the eggs are being laid is kept a little bit shorter, there's not such a nice place for the adults to come in and lay their eggs, so that's something. And this tends to be a problem in new builds. It tends to be in the turf that is put down. So just have a little look in the turf and see. You can also do something which is called sweating, whereby you water the turf and then you cover it over with plastic film. And you do that, and then as it all gets really warm, everything comes up to the surface, and then you can either sweep off, because there's so many of the leather jackets at the surface, you can either sweep them off and get them into buckets and put them on the bird table, or put them into your wildlife pond for things to have to eat. Or you leave them there for the birds to come in and get, but it's a good way of getting them up to the surface so that they're not underneath. So that is called sweating. You can look that one up. The RHS give you a really good guide on how to do it properly, but it's basically giving the ground a really good wetting, covering over with plastic film. You don't have to do the whole thing at once, do a bit at a time, and you will get all of the grubs coming up to the surface. So that's a way of doing it without having to use chemicals. Hello Rosie, what advice would you give, do's or don'ts, to a gardener, particularly a beginner, on what to do? Well, the answer is always enjoy your garden. Do not be frightened of it. Do not be frightened of making mistakes. We all make mistakes. Even us older people who have been gardening for years can have a disaster. That's how we learn. So, do not worry about making mistakes. I think that is the biggest key, because everybody's worried that they're going to do something wrong. Don't be worried. Plants are resilient. They will tell you if they're not happy. Basically, they either die or they look sick. That's fine, in which case move them. And don't think, oh, I've got to try and keep it going in that position. If it's unhappy in one position, move it. And that's the thing to do. Do not be frightened to try things, and just enjoy your garden. Hi Rosie, I have a small shady border at the back of my garden where the soil stays quite damp and poor drainage. Everything I've tried, ferns, the only things that are really surviving are some seed sown lupins and honesty, and that's it. What do I do? Are there any suggestions? So it sounds like seed sown things are doing quite well. So that is something to think about. Perhaps get yourself a mix and sow some seed, because you should be able to get Aquilegia and some of these other plants growing there. If you've got lupin and honesty growing there, they are tap-rooted plants, by the way, so they're obviously getting through that top wet bit and going down, and then they're absolutely fine. So that's quite good, and lupins like it wet. So if you look for plants that like to be in moister conditions, that will also help. But I reckon try a little bit of seed. The other thing is try a little bit of improvement of your drainage. That will go a long way. So look for small plants. Don't try and put in big plants. Try small plants. When you're planting, if you're not going to try the seed method, try a bit of grit in with your compost so that it improves the drainage in that place, so the plant has a chance to get away and do well. And if you're choosing ferns, choose ferns that like to grow in really damp areas. Look for plants that like to be in damp areas. So go for the plants that like to be, say, in bog gardens, such as Regersea, Silene fimbriata. Try things like that, which are happier in damper soils. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.